escorting a guest off the set. Andy Cohen sat behind his desk on a typical Tuesday evening, ready to film another episode of his wildly popular talk show. The lights were bright, the audience was buzzing with excitement, and everything seemed perfectly normal. His team had prepped him on the guest list, and tonight's main interview was supposed to be straightforward. A quick chat, some laughs, maybe a few stories, and everyone goes home happy. That's how these things usually work. But from the moment Meghan walked onto the stage, something felt different. The energy was off. Andy stood up to greet her with his usual warm smile, extending his hand for a friendly handshake. She barely looked at him. No smile. No warmth. Just a cold, distant nod as she made her way to the guest chair. The audience noticed it too. You could feel the tension creeping into the room like a dark cloud rolling in before a storm. Andy tried to lighten the mood. He always does. It's his gift. He knows how to make people comfortable, how to put them at ease, how to turn awkward moments into comedy gold. So he flashed that signature grin and said, "Welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you here tonight." Simple, kind, professional. But Meghan just stared at him. No response, not even a polite thank you. She crossed her arms and leaned back in the chair like she was already annoyed. The first few questions were gentle. Andy asked about her recent projects, about life in California, about what she'd been up to lately. Standard talk show stuff. Nothing invasive, nothing controversial. But every answer she gave was short, clipped, and dripping with attitude. When Andy tried to joke around, she didn't laugh. When he tried to dig deeper, she shot him down with one-word answers. It was like pulling teeth. The audience started shifting in their seats, sensing the discomfort. Then, Andy did what any good host would do. He pivoted. He tried to find common ground, tried to steer the conversation toward something she might actually want to talk about. He brought up her advocacy work, her charity efforts, the causes she's passionate about. Surely that would get her to open up, right? Wrong. She rolled her eyes. Don actually rolled her eyes on camera, and then she said something that made everyone in the studio freeze. "You know, Andy, I didn't come here to be interrogated like some criminal. These questions are beneath me." Her voice was sharp, cutting. Andy blinked, genuinely surprised. He'd barely asked her anything, nothing remotely aggressive or inappropriate. But before he could respond, she kept going. "I thought this was supposed to be a serious show, not some cheap tabloid interview. Maybe you should do your research before you have real guests on." The audience gasped. You could hear it ripple through the room. Andy, to his credit, stayed calm. He's a professional. He's dealt with difficult guests before. So he smiled, took a breath, and said, "I apologize if you feel that way. That certainly wasn't my intention. I'm just trying to have a conversation with you. That's what we do here. We talk. We connect with our guests. That's the whole point of the show." But she wasn't having it. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Connect? You call this connecting? You're sitting there with your little note cards, asking me these ridiculous surface-level questions, like I'm some nobody. Do you have any idea who I am? Do you know what I've accomplished? What I've been through?" Andy kept his composure, but you could see the shift in his face. The friendliness was fading, replaced by something more serious. "I'm very aware of who you are," he said, his voice steady. "That's why we invited you on the show. We wanted to give you a platform to share your story, to talk about the things that matter to you. But I can't do that if you're not willing to engage." That's when she laughed. Not a real laugh. One of those fake, condescending laughs that makes your skin crawl. "A platform? You think I need your platform? Please. I've been on every major show in the world. I've sat down with the biggest names in journalism. And you think I need you?" She waved her hand dismissively. "This is just another paycheck for me, Andy. Don't flatter yourself." The room went dead silent. Even the crew, who had seen plenty of wild moments over the years, looked shocked. Andy's jaw tightened. He set his note cards down on the desk slowly, deliberately, and looked her straight in the eye. "You know what?" he said, his voice calm but firm. "I've tried to be respectful. I've tried to make this work. But if you're just here for a paycheck and you have no interest in actually being a guest on this show, then maybe this isn't the right fit." She scoffed. "Oh, is that a threat? Are you threatening me right now?" She pointed at him like he was the one out of line. "You know what your problem is, Andy. You think you're so important because you have this little show and these little fans who worship you. But the truth is, you're nothing. You're a nobody trying to make a name off of people like me." Andy stood up. "That's how you knew it was serious. Andy Cohen doesn't stand up in the middle of an interview unless something is very, very wrong." He looked at her, then at his producers, then back at her. "I think we're done here," he said simply. "No yelling, no drama. Just a clear, direct statement. This interview is over." But she wasn't done. Oh, no, she was just getting started. She jumped to her feet, her voice rising. "You can't just end this. I came all the way here. I cleared my schedule for this. You begged me to come on this show. And now you're kicking me out because you can't handle a little honesty?" "Honesty?" Andy shot back, his patience finally wearing thin. "You've been nothing but disrespectful since the moment you walked out here. I've asked you simple questions, kind questions, and you've responded with insults and attitude. So yes, we're done. Thank you for coming, but this is my show, and I'm not going to sit here and be talked down to on my own set." She pointed a finger at him, her face flushed with anger. "You're making a huge mistake, Andy. A huge mistake. Do you know what kind of backlash you're going to get for this? Do you know who I am? I have millions of people who support me, who will hear about this, who will come for you." Andy didn't flinch. "I'm sure they will," he said calmly. "But I'm okay with that. Because I know what happened here tonight. The cameras know what happened here tonight. And honestly, I think the audience knows too." He glanced at the crowd, and a few people nodded. Some even started clapping. Quiet at first, but it grew. They were clapping for Andy, for standing his ground, for not letting himself be walked all over. That made her even angrier. She turned to the audience, her voice sharp and accusing. "Really? You're going to clap for him? After everything I've been through? After all the struggles I've faced? You people are unbelievable." She shook her head in disgust. "This is exactly what's wrong with this country. No respect. No compassion. Just a bunch of people tearing others down." Andy stepped around the desk, positioning himself between her and the audience. "That's enough," he said firmly. "You need to leave now." He motioned to someone off stage, and within seconds, 2 security guards appeared from the wings. They approached carefully, professionally, clearly trained for situations like this. She looked at the guards, then back at Andy, her mouth falling open in disbelief. "You're serious? You're actually having me escorted out? This is insane. This is absolutely insane." She grabbed her purse from beside the chair and held it against her chest like a shield. "You're going to regret this, Andy. I promise you. Man, you have no idea who you're messing with." "I'm messing with someone who came on my show and treated me like garbage for no reason," Andy replied. "And I'm okay with that. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but it's not going to be here. Not tonight. Not ever." The security guards gently took her by the arms, one on each side, and began guiding her toward the exit. She didn't resist physically, but she kept talking, kept shouting, really. "This is assault. You're assaulting me. Everyone see this? Everyone watching? He's having me forcibly removed because he can't handle the truth. This is who Andy Cohen really is. This is what he does when someone challenges him." Andy stood there, arms crossed, watching as they led her off the stage. The cameras kept rolling. The audience sat in stunned silence, not quite sure what to do. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked satisfied, like justice had been served. But everyone was watching. Everyone saw it happen. As she reached the edge of the stage, she turned back one last time, her voice echoing through the studio. "You'll pay for this, Andy. Mark my words. You'll pay." And then she was gone, disappearing into the backstage area with the security guards flanking her. The heavy door slammed shut behind them, and just like that, it was over. Andy walked back to his desk and sat down. He took a long breath, ran a hand through his hair, and looked at the camera. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just sat there, processing what had just happened. Then he smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, tired smile. "Well," he said to the audience, "that was something." The audience laughed. Real, genuine laughter. The tension broke like a dam bursting. People started clapping again, louder this time, standing up, giving Andy a full ovation. He waved them off, embarrassed, but clearly touched by the support. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do." He picked up his note cards and tapped them against the desk, straightening them out. "You know," he continued, his voice thoughtful, "I've been doing this for a long time. I've interviewed a lot of people. Celebrities, politicians, athletes, you name it. And most of them are wonderful. Most of them are kind, gracious, and happy to be here. But every once in a while, you get someone who just isn't. And that's okay. That's life. Not everyone is going to like you. Not everyone is going to respect what you do. But that doesn't mean you have to put up with being treated poorly." The audience clapped again, and Andy smiled wider. "I'm not going to sit here and bash anyone. That's not who I am. But I will say this. If you come on this show, all I ask is that you show up with respect. Respect for me. Respect for the crew. Respect for the audience. That's it. That's the only rule. And if you can't do that, then yeah, this isn't going to work. And that's fine. There are plenty of other shows out there. Plenty of other hosts. Go find one that suits you better." He glanced off stage where one of the producers was giving him a thumbs up, signaling that everything was okay. He nodded back, then turned to the camera. "All right, let's move on. We've got other guests tonight who actually want to be here. Let's bring them out and have some fun. Aye, shall we?" The band started playing, the audience cheered, and the show continued like nothing had happened. But backstage, chaos was unfolding. The security guards had escorted Meghan to a private room where she could collect herself before leaving the building. But she wasn't collecting herself. She was pacing back and forth, shouting into her phone. "Get my lawyer on the line right now. Right now. I don't care what time it is. This is an emergency." She was furious, absolutely livid, and she was making sure everyone within earshot knew it. One of the producers, a woman named Lisa, who had been with the show for years, knocked on the door and stepped inside. "Hi," she said gently, trying to de-escalate the situation. "I just wanted to check on you and see if you needed anything before you go." Meghan whipped around, her eyes blazing. "What I need is for your boss to come in here and apologize. That's what I need. He humiliated me. He embarrassed me in front of millions of people. Do you understand how serious this is?" Lisa stayed calm, professional. She'd dealt with plenty of difficult situations before. "I understand you're upset," she said. "But from my perspective, and I think from Andy's perspective as well, you were being quite rude to him. He tried to conduct the interview, and you repeatedly insulted him in the show. He has every right to end an interview under those circumstances." Meghan's face turned red. "Rude? I was rude? He's the one who asked me those ridiculous questions. He's the one who wasted my time. I came here as a favor, and this is how I get treated?" She threw her hands up in frustration. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Lisa nodded slowly, choosing her words carefully. I think maybe there was a miscommunication about what this interview was going to be. Andy's show is pretty informal. It's fun, it's light, it's conversational. If you were expecting something more formal or serious, then yeah, I can see how there might have been a disconnect. But the way you spoke to him, the things you said, that wasn't okay. That's not how we do things here. Meghan stared at her for a long moment, then laughed bitterly. Of course you're taking his side. You all work for him. You're all going to protect him. Well, let me tell you something. When this gets out, and it will get out, people are going to see the truth. They're going to see how I was treated, how I was disrespected, and they're going to be on my side, not his. Lisa didn't argue, and there was no point. Your car is waiting outside whenever you're ready, she said quietly. Take your time, but we do need you to leave the building soon. She turned and left the room, closing the door behind her. Inside, Meghan continued pacing, continued making calls, continued spinning the narrative in her head about how she was the victim, how Andy was the villain, how this whole thing was just another example of her being mistreated. One of the camera operators, a guy named Marcus, who had been filming talk shows for over 20 years, stood near the control room with his arms folded. He was shaking his head, still processing what he'd just witnessed. I've never seen anything like that, he said to another crew member. Never, and I've filmed some crazy stuff. His colleague nodded in agreement. Andy handled it perfectly, though. What else could he do? She was attacking him from the start. He tried everything. Marcus glanced toward the stage where Andy was now laughing with his other guests. That's what I respect about him. He doesn't let it ruin the whole show. He just moves on, keeps it professional. That takes real strength, you know? To be insulted like that on your own show, and then turn around and be charming 5 minutes later? That's talent. Back in the holding room, Meghan was still on the phone, her voice getting louder and more agitated. I don't care what it takes. I want a statement out tonight. Tonight. Make it clear that I was ambushed, that he was hostile from the start, that he created an unsafe environment. Use whatever language you need to use, but make me the victim here, because that's what I am. I'm the victim. The person on the other end of the line must have asked her a question because she paused, her jaw clenching. What do you mean what actually happened? I just told you what happened. He brought me on to humiliate me. He asked me insulting questions. He dismissed everything I tried to say. And then, when I stood up for myself, he had me thrown out. That's what happened. There was another pause, longer this time. Her face went from red to pale. What do you mean the cameras caught everything? Of course the cameras caught everything. It's a television show. Another pause. No, I don't think that's a problem. People will see that he was attacking me. They'll see my side. They always do. But her voice had lost some of its certainty. The confidence was cracking. Meanwhile, out on the stage. So Andy was wrapping up the show with his other guests. They were laughing, joking, having a great time. It was like the earlier incident had been completely forgotten. But of course, it hadn't been. The cameras had caught everything. The producers had recorded everything. And by tomorrow morning, the internet was going to be on fire with clips, reactions, and hot takes about what had gone down. Andy introduced his final guest of the night, a comedian who immediately made a joke about the earlier drama. So, should I be worried? Am I going to get kicked off too? The audience laughed. Andy laughed. And just like that, the mood was light again. Andy played along. Only if you start insulting my note cards. I'm very protective of my note cards. More laughter. The comedian grinned. Don't worry, I love note cards. Note cards are my favorite thing. The interview went smoothly. Fun. Easy. Exactly what a talk show interview should be. And when it was over, Andy thanked his guest, thanked the audience, and did his usual sign-off. That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. And remember, always be kind to each other. It costs nothing to be respectful. He winked at the camera, the lights dimmed, and the show was officially over. But for now, in this moment, Andy was just doing his job. He was entertaining his audience, making people laugh, giving them a reason to tune in. And when the show finally ended and the cameras stopped rolling, he stood up, thanked his guests, thanked his crew, and walked off the stage with his head held high. The crew started breaking down the set, unplugging cables, switching off lights, doing all the things they do every night after a show wraps. But tonight was different. Everyone was buzzing. Everyone was talking about what had happened. The makeup artist was texting her friends. The sound guy was already predicting it would go viral. The stage manager was wondering if this would be the most watched clip in the show's history. In his dressing room, Andy sat down on the couch and let out a long exhale. His assistant poked her head in. "You want anything? Water? Coffee?" Andy shook his head. "No, I'm good. Just need a minute." She nodded and closed the door, giving him some space. He sat there in the quiet, replaying the whole thing in his mind. Had he done the right thing? Yes. Could he have handled it differently? Maybe. But would he change anything if he could go back? No, absolutely not. Because at the end of the day, Andy Cohen knew something important. He knew that respect goes both ways. He knew that no amount of fame or status gives someone the right to treat others poorly. And he knew that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up for yourself. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's difficult, even when the other person has a bigger platform, or more followers, or more influence. He had done the right thing. He had protected his space, his crew, and his audience from someone who was determined to bring negativity into the room. And sure, there would be backlash. There would be headlines and debates and people picking sides. But Andy was okay with that. Because he knew the truth. He knew what happened in that room. And he knew he had nothing to apologize for. The story of that night would become legendary. People would talk about it for months. Some would defend Meghan, claiming she was right to call out what she saw as beneath her. Others would rally behind Andy, praising him for not tolerating disrespect. But regardless of which side people fell on, everyone agreed on one thing. It was one of the most dramatic, explosive, and unforgettable moments in talk show history. And it all started with one comment. One dismissive, condescending comment that set off a chain reaction nobody could have predicted. 38 seconds. That's all it took. 38 seconds from the first insult to the moment Andy decided enough was enough. 38 seconds that changed everything. Because sometimes that's all it takes. One moment, one decision, one line that shouldn't be crossed. When Meghan finally left the building that night, she climbed into the back of her waiting car and slammed the door. The driver asked if she was okay. She didn't answer. She just stared out the window, her mind racing, already planning her next move. How she would spin this. Who she would call. What she would say to her team, to her publicist, to the world. The car pulled away from the studio, the city lights blurring past the window. Inside, Meghan was already drafting statements in her head, already imagining the headlines, already convinced that she would come out of this looking like the hero. But somewhere deep down, in a place she refused to acknowledge, she knew the truth. She knew what she had done. She knew how she had acted. And she knew that no amount of spin would change the fact that she had walked into that studio with an attitude and walked out with a scandal. But back inside the studio, Andy was sitting in his dressing room, taking off his microphone, unwinding from the show. One of his close friends from the crew knocked and poked their head in. "You okay?" they asked. Andy looked up and smiled. A real smile this time. "Yeah," he said. "I'm good. I'm really good." And he meant it, because he had stood up for himself. He had drawn a line, and he had shown everyone watching that kindness and